Montana Territory. Autumn of 1879, the wind carried a bitter edge as Beau Vexley rode hard through the dying light, dust trailing behind his horse like smoke from a fire that would not burn out. He had not planned on stopping in Marlow Creek. Just another dried-up town on the edge of nowhere, tucked between the pines and forgotten hills. But the letter in his saddlebag had changed everything. It was scrawled in a rough hand, unsigned, but it had told him enough. There's a girl locked under the old Whitlow house, still alive. Please? Beau did not ask questions when someone asked for help, not anymore. The Whitlow place sat crooked on a hill northeast of town, shutters broken, porch sagging. For years, it had been empty at least, that was what folks thought. Beau tied off his horse behind the barn and walked in the quiet, rifle slung loose over his shoulder, boots silent over the cold ground. He found the basement door near the back of the house, half sunken into the earth, hidden beneath a pile of rotted firewood and brush. The padlock was rusted but strong. He pried it off with the back of his hatchet and pulled the door open. The smell hit first damp wood, mildew, and something fainter, something human. "Hello," he called. "You down there?" For a moment, nothing, then a voice hoarse and small. "Yes." He stepped down into the dark. It was cold, far colder than it should have been, and the only light came from the crack he left in the door behind him. His boots scraped against stone. He found her curled in one corner, a blanket around her shoulders, her face pale and thin, but her gaze steady and clear. "My name's Beau Vexley," he said. "I came to get you out." She blinked, as if not sure he was real. Then she nodded once. Her name was Penna Vale. She had been held there for over 2 months. Beau helped her up, steadying her with a hand beneath her arm. She did not cry or collapse. She moved slow but sure, like a woman who had learned to survive in silence. Once outside, she closed her eyes against the light, and for a long minute she just breathed. "I thought I would die in there," she whispered. "You are not going to." They made camp a mile from town, near a creek that still ran clean and cold. Beau built a fire while Penna sat wrapped in a wool coat he had pulled from his bedroll. She did not ask questions, just watched the flames like they held a secret she had almost forgotten. "You got any family I can get you to?" he asked after a while. She shook her head. "No one left." He did not press. Instead, he handed her half a biscuit and some jerky, which she took with careful hands. "Why did you come?" she asked. "Because someone had to," he said. She was quiet, then looked at him, her eyes steady. "Do people usually do that for you?" Beau smiled, but it did not quite reach his eyes. "No." That night, she slept curled near the fire, her head resting on rolled canvas. Beau stayed awake, rifle across his knees. He did not know who had locked her away, but someone had. And someone might come looking. By morning, he had made a choice. "I can take you to Miles City. There's a church there, runs a shelter." Or he paused, watching her brush the hair from her face with trembling fingers. "You can ride with me. I got land up near the mussel shell. Not much, but it is safe. You can stay a while, get your strength back." Penna looked up at him, her face unreadable. "Why would you do that?" "Because I want to," he said. She held his gaze for a long time, and something inside her shifted. Not trust, not yet, but something close. "All right." They rode north together that same day. The trail was long and the air sharp with the first breath of winter. Penna rode his mare while he led on foot, guiding them through the hills and past the cottonwoods that lined the river. He talked little, but he watched her. She was strong, even when she faltered. He saw it in the way she kept going, in the way she never once asked to stop. The cabin came into view on the third evening, a small place, tucked against the trees, with a garden gone wild and a barn that leaned a little too far to the west. It was not much, but it was home. Penna stood in the doorway for a long time before stepping inside. "It is warm," she murmured, as if surprised. Beau nodded. "It will be yours if you want it." She turned to him. "You do not know me. I know you enough to know you got light left in you," he said. "And I could use some of that." Penna looked down, then back up, and for the first time since he found her, she smiled. It was small, but it was real. That night they sat by the fire, sharing stew and quiet. Outside, the wind howled across the hills, but inside it was calm. "You ever get tired of being alone?" she asked. "All the time," he said. She nodded. "Me too." And for the first time in a long while, neither of them felt quite so alone anymore. The fire had died to coals by morning, and frost veiled the windows in thin lace. Penna stirred from the cot near the hearth, her breath visible in the air. She sat up slowly, legs dangling over the edge. The wool socks Beau had given her slipping against the floorboards. He was already outside, splitting wood with steady rhythm. She watched from the doorway, arms folded against the cold. His coat hung loose at the shoulders, and each swing of the axe sent a shudder through the stump beneath it. "You always start the day with that?" she asked, stepping out. He glanced over. "Winter's coming. Better to keep ahead of it than let it find you wanting." She walked toward the stack of logs. "Show me how." He studied her for a beat, then passed her the axe. It was heavier than she expected. She set her stance awkwardly, and her first swing glanced off the side of the log. "Not like that," he said gently. "Let it fall through, don't push it. Hips do more than your arms." She tried again, adjusting her grip, and this time the blade split the log clean. A sharp crack rang out, echoing through the trees. A quiet pride flickered in her chest. She hadn't done much with her hands in a long time that made her feel capable. "You pick up fast," he said. "I had a lot of time to think about what I'd do if I ever got out." He didn't ask what else was on that list. By midday, she had chopped enough for a full rack, and her shoulders ached in a way that made her feel human again. Beau handed her a tin of water, and they sat on the porch rail, watching the wind chase dried leaves across the yard. "You ever been farther west?" she asked. "Not past the river. Never saw the ocean, if that's what you're asking." "I used to dream about it when I was little. Thought maybe I'd open a shop in San Francisco, sell ribbon and soap, silly things like that. Doesn't sound silly. I still want it sometimes, but not like before." She looked out at the trees. "Now I want something that doesn't disappear when men get angry." Beau didn't answer right away. The breeze picked up, lifting her hair against her cheek. "Lot of folks want to build something that lasts," he said. "Few actually do." She turned to him. "What about you?" "I tried once. Built a place with someone, didn't hold. Turns out love isn't enough when you're both running from different ghosts." She nodded. "I think I stopped running the night you found me." "I think I started that night." They sat a while longer, letting silence settle between them without weight. In the evening, Penna wandered into the barn. Dust motes floated in the light slanting through the boards. A rusted lantern hung from a nail near the door, and beyond it, a saddle rested on a sawhorse. She ran her fingers along the worn leather, the scent of hay and old wood filling her lungs. "You ride much?" Beau asked from behind her. "Not since I was 16. My father had a gelding named Jasper. He used to let me ride him bareback through the orchard after church. You remember the name of the horse, but not the orchard. The orchard's gone. They sold the land. Jasper's still in my bones." Beau chuckled quietly. "I've got a gelding here, name's Pike. Steady, not fast, might let you sit him tomorrow." "I'd like that." She turned to him, her eyes catching the lantern light. "You always this generous with strangers. You stopped being a stranger the minute you said you'd come north." Penna didn't reply. But her gaze softened, and her shoulders eased in a way that hadn't happened since she'd arrived. That night, she set the table while he ladled stew into bowls. There were only 2 chairs. She nodded toward the third corner of the table. "You ever build a third one?" "No reason till now." She let the thought rest between them. After supper, she stood at the window, looking out at the dark. Behind her, he cleared dishes with quiet movements. She didn't turn when she spoke. "I didn't think anyone would come for me. I kept counting days until the counting didn't mean anything anymore." "You don't have to count now." She turned then. "And if it gets hard again, it will. Then what? Then we get through it, one day at a time, same as now." She stepped closer. "You really believe that?" He looked at her, steady and quiet. "I do." Penna breathed in slow, her fingers brushing the edge of the table. "Then maybe you can teach me how." He nodded once. "All right." And for the first time, the space between them didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a door. The first snow came quiet, covering the hills in a thin hush just after dawn. Penna stepped outside in borrowed boots, breath rising in the still air, and let the cold bite her face. She tilted her head back, letting flakes melt against her skin. Beau was near the corral, checking a loose rail. His shirt was damp from sweat, steam rising off his shoulders. When he looked up and saw her standing there, he set the hammer aside and walked over. "You ever seen snow this early?" she asked. "Once," he said. "Back when I was riding dispatch out of Fort Keogh." Woke up blanketed in it, horse near froze solid. She crouched, scooping a handful and pressing it between her palms. Feels like the land just went quiet all at once, he nodded. It does that come winter. Makes a man think longer than he means to. They shared a silence that stretched without strain, then she stood and brushed her hands off. Do you have any oats? She asked. He blinked. For the horses? No, for baking. I thought I might try making something. I think there's a sack in the root cellar. You find it, it's yours to do with. Penna spent the better part of that morning in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, brow furrowed. She moved like someone remembering the shape of a life she'd once known, measuring by sight, trusting her hands. The smell of cinnamon and wood smoke warmed the air by the time Beau came in, stomping snow from his boots. You cook too? He asked. I used to, for my sister mostly. She always said my oatcakes could make a preacher forget his sermon. He took a bite without waiting, chewed slow. She wasn't wrong. Her smile came easy this time, a warmth not just in her face but in how she stood near him, closer than before. Later, Beau brought in 2 chairs from the barn, rough-hewn and needing mending. He set them near the stove and handed her a length of twine. You ever do caning? He asked. Only once. My aunt let me try after she wore out a rocker seat. Said I had a patient hand. Then you're ahead of me already. They worked side by side, knees nearly touching, fingers threading fibers through the frames. The work took hours, neither rushed it. You ever think about leaving here? She asked, not looking up. Sometimes. Not lately. What changed? He paused, pulling the twine taut. You did. Color rose in her cheeks. She didn't hide it, didn't laugh it off. I've never been anyone's reason before. You've been someone's reason to hurt. That's not the same. She met his eyes, steady. No. It's not. They finished the chairs by lamplight. Beau tested one, leaning back with a creak. Not bad, he said. She sat in the other. They'll hold. The next day, a letter arrived by way of a trapper passing through. Beau opened it at the table, eyes scanning quick. He folded it once and set it down. Sheriff in Marlow Creek found who did it, he said. Man tried to run south, didn't make it far. Penna's hand stilled on the mug she held. Did he say why? There's no why good enough. She looked out the window at the snow gathering along the fence line. I don't feel anything, just done with it. That's something, he said. That night she lit the lantern while he banked the fire. She turned to him, the light catching her features in gold and shadow. I used to think light was something you had to earn, she said. And now I think it's something you carry, even when you're buried deep. He stepped closer, hands stilling at his sides. You carried it through things most folks wouldn't survive. I didn't carry it alone. Her voice was steady, but her gaze shimmered. You walked into the dark and brought me out. I didn't know what I'd find. You found me anyway. He reached for her hand, calloused fingers closing around hers. She didn't flinch. I don't want to leave, she said. Not this place. Not you. You won't have to. Their foreheads touched, breath shared in the hush, no promises spoken, none needed. What passed between them had been built quiet day by day from ash and morning frost and the way 2 people learn to reach without fear. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the cabin held. By mid-December, the river had frozen over. Thin lines of rabbit tracks traced along its edge, and the air held a stillness that made every sound feel louder than it was. Penna stood behind the cabin, a scarf wrapped high around her neck, sleeves dusted with flour from the biscuits she'd left rising on the stove. She watched Beau across the yard, where he was repairing the hinges on the smokehouse door, his breath rising in steady clouds. When she crossed to him, her boots crunching softly over the crusted snow, he didn't look up right away. She crouched beside him, holding the door steady as he drove the last nail home. I've been thinking, she said. He tapped the hammer once more against the hinge and set it down. About, spring, what we'll plant. I don't want just potatoes and beans. I saw a catalog once had sweet corn and yellow squash. There was a kind of berry too, smaller than raspberries but sweeter, they said. I've got seed sacks in the loft. We'll see what we can trade for come thaw. She leaned her shoulder against the wall. You ever miss the trail? He looked at her then. I used to, the quiet, the way the land just stretched out with no end to it. And now, I find I like seeing the same roof over my head every morning. And the same face across from me. Penna didn't smile. Instead, she reached out and touched the edge of his coat, fingertips brushing the worn seam near his collar. Then we'll make it a good roof, a strong one. That night, the wind rose hard from the north, rattling the shutters. Penna brought in a bundle of kindling while Beau stirred stew over the fire. As she tossed the wood into the box beside the hearth, her eyes fell on the small shelf above the mantel, 3 chipped ceramic figures arranged in a row. A hunter, a horse, and a woman holding a lantern. "Where'd these come from?" she asked. He stirred slow. "My sister sent them years back, said they reminded her of how we grew up. She kept the rest of the set. I didn't know you had a sister. Haven't seen her since the war ended. Lives down near Laramie. Married a tanner, last I heard." Penna stepped over and lifted the lantern figure, turning it in her palm. "She looks like she's searching for something. She always said it was hope she carried." Penna set it back gently in its place. "Seems fitting." After supper, Beau brought out a slate and chalk from the trunk behind the bed. He handed them to her, then sat back in the chair with his hands resting on his thighs. "I was wondering if you'd teach me to write better," he said. "I get by, but it's more guessing than knowing." She blinked, then nodded slowly. "Of course, we'll start with shapes, then sounds. You'll be writing letters before spring. To who? Anyone you want. Could be me." He looked at her quiet, then nodded once. "All right." They worked by lantern light, her voice soft as she guided his hand. It was slow going, but he didn't shy from mistakes. She corrected him gently, never laughing, only offering her hand when his grip faltered. Later, as the fire burned low, she set down the slate and leaned back in her chair. Her eyes were tired, but there was something settled in them. "I used to think the world was done with me," she said, "that anything good had passed me by. You still think that?" She shook her head. "Not anymore. Not since you gave me a place to be seen. You were always worth seeing." Her fingers curled around the armrest, and she looked at him across the space between them. "If I stay," she said, "I want to build more than a room to sleep in. I want to build something we can hold on to." "You already are," he said. She stood then, crossed the floor, and sat on the edge of his chair. Her hand found his, warm and certain. "I don't want to wait for spring to start living," she said. "Not when we're already standing in what we hoped for." Beau's voice came low. "Then stay." Her forehead touched his, breath shared between them. "I will." And in that quiet, where wind howled beyond the walls and the fire gave off its final warmth, 2 souls who had once been scattered found the shape of a life they could build together, steady as the snow falling outside. By late January, the light had changed. It slanted longer across the floorboards, softer around the edges, as though the world itself was drawing breath after holding it too long. The snow still lay thick across the ridge, but the air no longer cut like it had in December. Days stretched just enough to notice. Penna sat near the stove, needle in hand, mending a sleeve Beau had torn on a nail near the north pasture. Her stitches were even, though her fingers still felt clumsy in the cold. She glanced over as Beau came in, brushing snow from his shoulders. "There's a fox den under the bluff," he said, setting his gloves on the bench. "Tracks all around the fence. I'll make sure nothing gets into the feed." She tied off the thread and folded the shirt. "You ever trap?" "Used to. Don't have the taste for it anymore." She nodded. "I'd rather leave them be if we can." Beau stepped closer, took the shirt from her hands. "You do this for everyone who tears a sleeve?" "I only ever mended for family." He looked at her, eyes steady. "Then I'm honored." She reached for the kettle without answering, pouring water into 2 cracked mugs. As she passed him one, her hand lingered against his. He didn't pull away. Later that week, they walked the line of the fence behind the barn. The snow had begun to sink in patches, revealing the brittle grass beneath. Penna paused near the far end, squinting down at a cluster of stones half buried in the drift. "Was someone buried here?" she asked. Beau followed her gaze. "No, that's where I planted the apple saplings last spring." "Lost them to frost." She crouched beside the stones, brushing snow from the base of one. "We could try again. If we start in pots, keep them near the stove, maybe they'd take this time." He watched her fingers trace the edge of the stone. "You want to plant trees?" "I want to stay long enough to watch them grow." For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he reached down and she took his hand without hesitation. They stood like that a while, the wind low around them, the sky pale and clean. Inside, she moved her things from the cot to the larger bed without ceremony. He didn't ask, didn't comment, just reached for the quilt and laid it over her side that night without a word. They slept back to back, the space between them warm. In February, she found the old ledger tucked behind a stack of seed catalogs. It was filled with Beau's early notes supplies, fence measurements, debts owed and repaid. She traced his handwriting, tilted and careful, then added a new page in her own hand labeled Spring. That evening, she showed him the list. Chickens, a new whetstone, oilcloth for the roofline, and a set of oil paints. Paints, he asked, brow lifting. I used to draw, she said. I'd like to do it again. He didn't question it. The days fell into rhythm. She baked on Sundays, and he took over mending the harnesses without being asked. They spoke little over meals, but the quiet was easy, filled with the sounds of living chairs creaking, spoons clinking, the soft shift of fabric as one leaned close to pass salt or brush against the other's arm. One night, as wind pressed against the eaves, Penna set down her cup and folded her hands on the table. I've been thinking, she said, about the land, about what we could make of it. Beau leaned back, listening. There's a spring down past the bluff. If we cleared the brush, we could build a pen and run some goats, maybe even a milk cow if we trade right. He nodded slowly. You thinking about staying for good? She met his gaze. I already have. He reached across the table, his hand closing over hers. So have I. In March, they rode into town together for supplies. The general store owner, a man with a gray beard and a stiff gait, tilted his head when he saw them. Didn't expect to see you two as a pair, he said. Penna only smiled. Well, we are. They bought nails, seed, and the set of paints. On the ride home, Penna held the small box in her lap, fingers curled around it like it was something precious. That night, she painted the garden wall with a single line of blue flowers. Beau stood beside her, watching the color bloom against the wood. You made that from nothing, he said. I didn't, she said. I made it from surviving. Spring came in fits, a thaw followed by another freeze, then a day of sun that turned the paths to mud. They planted root vegetables first, then squash and corn. The apple seeds stayed by the stove, sprouting pale green shoots in a row of small pots. One morning in late April, Beau came in with a bundle of wildflowers and set them on the table. Purple ones are for courage, he said. Least that's what my mother always said. She took them from his hands, pressed her face to the blooms. Then I'll keep them close. That night, they stood at the edge of the pasture, watching the sky bleed into stars. You sure about this? He asked. I've never been more sure. He turned to her and she reached up, fingers brushing his jaw. When she kissed him, it was slow and certain, like a promise already made. They married in June, under the cottonwoods at the creek's bend. The preacher from the circuit out of Lewistown came through just once that month, but it was enough. Penna wore a dress she'd sewn herself, and Beau carved their initials into the fence post beside the barn. By late summer, the apple saplings were sturdy enough to plant. Penna dug the holes herself, sweat streaking her temples, fingers stained with soil. Beau watered them after dusk, careful not to spill. The house filled with small things drawings pinned near the stove, a shawl draped over the chair she always read in, the scent of lavender she tucked into the linen chest. They never spoke again of the cellar or the man who put her there, not because it was forgotten, but because it no longer held power over the life they lived now, years past. The trees grew tall enough to cast shade. The goats came, then a calf, then hens that laid brown eggs in the warmth of the coop. Penna painted the inside of the barn with a mural of sky and wheat. Beau built a bench beneath the window where she sat each morning, sketching with fingers that no longer trembled. They grew old together, quiet and content. On cold nights, he read aloud from the ledger she kept near the hearth, now filled with years of planting and harvest. She'd rest her head on his shoulder, eyes closed, listening to the sound of their life written plain as ink. And when the wind rose, as it always did, their home stood firm, built from more than wood and stone, from choice, from healing, from the way two people can carry light for each other in the dark. They lived all their days side by side, and not once did either of them walk alone again.